Hi, thanks for tuning in to this One Cool Thing video on 7 powerful ways to use Google Forms. This is a recap of a session I did in person at Saratoga High School today, and I'm doing a follow-up video on it to share for anybody who didn't see it in person. So one of the things we started talking about right at the beginning was how little time there was and how much time we spend as teachers taking schoolwork home, whether it's prep or grading. I see a lot of colleagues spending a ton of time giving really meaningful, constructive feedback for our students, taking grading home. And one of the things I'm always trying to do as a teacher, but also now as a TOSA, is to find ways to leverage technology in a way that will maybe save us some time, perhaps give students that feedback and accountability that they need without burning us out and taking too much away from us. So these are some practical, powerful tools that I think can really help enhance students' learning, give them feedback that they need, or help them be more aware of their own metacognition, develop their own self-awareness as a learner. And then also there's some options here, some implementation tools of forms where you can actually help with your own growth and reflection as well as a teacher. So let's jump right in. So one of the first things you could do is have students track their work during independent projects. Oh, by the way, if you want to access this agenda, which is my running agenda, here's the bit.ly for it right here. So a lot of times if we're doing projects, it can be hard for students to keep track of their progress over the course of that project. And sometimes they need help, sometimes they're totally stuck, sometimes they're fine. And what I've created here is a template, which if you click on that link, it'll take you to make a forced copy of just this simple form. This could be a form that students complete at the start of class when they're working on a project. They come in, they click on the link, and it tracks their progress. So here I have a ask 3 before me rule, which is if you're stuck, ask Google. If not, ask YouTube or ask somebody else before you ask me, right? So there's kind of a guidance there, some instruction there. So they just enter in the date, their period, their name, and they just say, today I will. And then they give a status update, a red light, a yellow light, or a green light. Red light means I'm stuck and I can't go without checking in with you first. Yellow light, I'm kind of struggling, I don't want to touch base with you. Or green light, I'm good, leave me alone, right? So as a teacher, I could go up to the responses and even click on the spreadsheet. And this is why I like forms so much, is I can go and I can actually look for all those red and yellow lights. And then at the start of class, I can know, okay, I need to check in with these students first before I get to everybody else. So students can give an update, and I can target my instruction, and then also looking at the longevity of this project, I can actually then go back and see how they were tracking their progress as they proceeded through the progress, and I could even make it available for them to see how they were tracking their progress. So that's one way you can use it. Concept checks. So it's really important for our students to know what they're supposed to know and do, right? But do students always know that? Are we asking them to evaluate the learning throughout their unit? This is a form that I've created. Again, you can steal this as a template to practice for you as a teacher to identify what are the essential things for this unit, and then identify that in the top of the form. So you could change the unit number here and list maybe the 5 essential things that they need to know in this unit. And then if you insert those down below at the beginning of the unit, you could have students complete this form where they rate their current understanding from a 1, I don't understand it at all, to 10, I know it well enough, I could teach a friend. And so maybe at the beginning of the unit, you have them do this concept check. Maybe midway through the unit, you have them do it again. And then maybe at the end of the unit, close to the end of your final assessment, you have them do it again. So in this way, one, you can track their progression across each of these essential understandings, but more importantly, I'd argue they do. So this is a good way for them to stop and pause and reflect on, well, am I learning this? And obviously they're just rating their understanding. They're not being forced to show their understanding, but even just a little stop and think can be really powerful for both you and for them. Continuing on, tracking your own work. Do you ever wish you could capture some feedback at the end of a lesson? I know a lot of times I'll do a lesson and like, man, that did not go well, and I need to remember not to do that next year. And then I don't write it down, and then I forget, right? And then I make the same mistake the following year. So we can actually use forms to track our own feedback. And what you do is you basically take a form like this, and you just bookmark it. Put it at the top of your browser, and then at the end of a unit, show what it would actually look like. I would just pick my course, say it was biology. I would say what the unit was. I'd say what the lab or activity or lesson was. I'd spell out what worked and what needed to be improved next year. And then maybe next year when I'm doing my lesson planning for the year, or maybe next year right before I begin this unit, I can pull up this spreadsheet and just see, okay, what were some things that I said last year that worked or didn't work? Boom, I have it. So this can be a nice quick internal method of tracking your own progress and tracking and improving your teaching. I'm going to close out some of these. All right, moving on to the next one, rubrics. So in our district, in our school, a lot of teachers are using rubrics a lot more, and rubrics are great for being able to show students what they're supposed to know or do or demonstrate, and having that accountability and transparency. But it's also one thing that's unfortunate about our use of rubrics in Canvas is that they don't easily export data, and they're not very good, not very useful in our ability to sort and disaggregate that data. So I recently helped a department who needed the ability to analyze results from a common document-based question that they created. And oops, there we go. So I helped them put their rubric in a Google form. And so here they had a simple 3, 2, 1 score, place for the name, the period. Then they had, thesis, contextualization, evidence and analysis, source point of view. And so for each of these different points, criteria, they would give 1, 2, or 3. They'd have a spot for general feedback. And then if applicable, they could link to it. So what was really cool about this is that teachers who liked to grade digitally could have their essay, or the DBQ, in one window and then the form in the other window, and they could just go boom, 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 and score, so filling out the form. Or some teachers really like to still have like a paper rubric, so they like to read it in person. They would fill out the rubric and then pass it back to the students. So those teachers could either have, in some cases, those teachers actually had the students put their rubric scores in the form themselves, or they could have had a TA do it. But however you do it, you then have all of your data organized in a spreadsheet. And once it's in a spreadsheet, now you can do all sorts of sorting. You could find out who's doing really well and source point of view. Of all of these criteria, what's the one thing we really need to focus on more? So using a Google form for a rubric can be a really powerful way for you to really analyze the data and get down to the root of what you're seeing. So that's a really powerful way to use forms. I see some teachers use exit tickets. Usually, when I did it, exit tickets, it'd be like a little strip of scrap paper where I'd ask them to recap something that they learned today, or something they learned in a question they had, something like that. Well, forms could be a useful way of implementing an exit ticket. So it could be a standard link that students always complete at the end, where they would say, today's date, they'd input their name, the period, and then reflect. What did you work on today? Or this could be done every Friday or the end of every week. What did you work on this week? What did you learn? What did you struggle with? Be specific. And then, how did you process through those challenges? And what are your next steps? So this is kind of getting to that student metacognition where they can reflect on what they learned and look forward to the next steps in the next week. And then the last thing or second to last thing to talk about is assessment debrief. So I am putting this on here because shout out to Suzanne Herdsman at Saratoga High. She did a assessment debrief. She had given an assessment and she wanted students to go over that assessment and reflect on how they prepared for the assessment and what was the cause of any mistakes that they made. So this is mostly borrowed from her. So again, name, the score. Overall, my learning goal for this quiz debrief is, you get them to think about why are they doing this, not just to recoup points, but to actually learn. Overall, the score I learned was, so they're thinking about their expectations versus what actually happened. I added a question here about fairness because I know whenever I give tests, I would always ask students, did the test cover the same stuff we talked about in class? Were the same things that I emphasized in class emphasized in the assessment? So asking them to think about that. Was the score an accurate measure of their understanding? So these are kind of powerful for us as teachers to think about. And then what do they do to prepare for the quiz? That can be some really good talking points to discuss after you get that data. Asks them to look at what was the overall cause for missed responses. Were they careless mistakes or incomplete understanding, or were they duped by the distractor? Suzanne went on to have some really specific questions regarding a particular assessment. So you could have them very specific or very general, whatever you wanted to do. And again, you can steal this and make it your own. And then the last thing I'll just say about surveys is it can be really powerful for us to periodically survey our students about our teaching and how we're doing as a teacher. When I was first hired in the district, I was the pilot year where the district was making all non-tenured teachers administer a student survey. Since then, it's been happening every year. And so all of our non-tenured teachers every year give this in the fall and the spring. And what I've done is I've made a copy of this that one could copy themselves so that it's totally anonymous and independent. No one else would see the data. But if you're interested in giving a survey for your students to take, here's the survey that all of our teachers hired in the last 7 years have been taking and are giving in the fall and the spring. And giving surveys can be very vulnerable and intimidating, but trust me when I say it can be really informative and affirmative too. Sometimes it really affirms the great work that we're doing and also can give us some things to think about how we can grow it as a teacher. And if we can let go of that vulnerability and look at it more objectively, it can really enhance our practice as teachers. So those are 7 of many powerful ways you can use Google Forms. Matt Miller from Ditch That Textbook has 20 practical ways to use Google Forms. So if you want more, there is more there. So thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time. Bye-bye.